Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fiume, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I had the co-founders of Fitness Premier, Rick King and Jason Markowicz. Guys, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Thanks for having us.
Good. Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, well, nice having you guys on. I want to hear all about Fitness Premier. So who wants to go first? Let's hear the origin of this company.
Yeah, so I'll take a stab at it, Frank. Rick can plug any details I might miss. So we both got involved in the fitness space right out of college, basically. So origin of our story is both kind of love sports and fitness growing up. And back in 2004, 2005, we were both involved in a concept that had a lot of success in our backyard in Chicago. And long story short, we wanted to build something a little bit more community-centric and spread our roots into, to give back to people in some strategic markets. And hence Fitness Bear was born.
Rick, what do you remember when you first started out?
We both played sports our whole life, athletes our whole life. And, I remember we would work out together and kind of talked about, wouldn't it be great to make a career out of this and do this for a living? And we were both pretty persistent about that. So when we got out of school, we joined a brand that was emerging in the Chicagoland area and got involved pretty heavily right out of the gates. And we were really excited about it. But I think for us, quickly, we realized that it wasn't exactly what we thought it was going to be. It was the first low-cost model that came to the Chicagoland area, very successful and grew really fast. But for us, we wanted to be more involved in the community, provide a better service for our clients, provide a little bit more amenities, more avenues. And we were kind of restrained a little bit with the brand that we were a part of before. So we kind of theorized and set up a game plan internally. And shortly after, carved our own path after that.
Nice. And partnerships are never easy. So I'd kind of love to hear how you guys made it work, because when you're starting out, how did you decide, who was going to play what role? And do you guys complement each other, or are you guys very similar in terms of your personality and style?
It's an interesting paradigm because we're both pretty identical when it comes to personality and style in a lot of ways. They both have that D trait and kind of, hyperactive, entrepreneurs, if you will, right? So we both kind of have that traits. But I think over the years, we've developed a good relationship, obviously personally, and then professionally. I've learned kind of how to divide and conquer based on our skill sets and what we're both really good at naturally. So, in today's world, Rick does a great job of really oversees a lot of the company. And I try to focus more on macro level of like what might be around the corner in the industry and some of the industry relationships that are out there. And I think we do a fairly good job of that, Rick, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I agree. I think in any business, when you have partnerships, co-founders, I think it's very important to kind of delineate between the two early on who's going to be responsible for what, who's going to focus on what, who's going to be the expertise, the expert in certain areas. And I think we kind of naturally did that in the beginning. And then I think we were naturally doing that for a long time until we really sat down and defined it. And I think once we sat down and really defined it, it made both our lives a lot easier, and it made the business a lot more efficient. We weren't crossing over. There weren't as many blurred lines. So it was really crucial for us to do that. Like Jason said, he kind of focuses more on macro, high level, where the business is going, where the industry is going. And I really focus on the revenue, making sure the business is profitable, making sure our franchisees are successful, and redefining our systems and protocols.
Nice. Very good. Very good. Jason, what was life like when you guys were starting out together? Bring me back to the beginning.
Man, I tell you what, Frank, back 15, 20 years ago, we call it the school of hard knocks, right? Like all the lessons you learn being an early entrepreneur. So Rick and I have definitely been through that together. So we've opened a lot of locations ourselves, throughout the years. And by doing that, I think we've developed this almost like master level of the business, right? Like we really understand the business. We've been operators for over 2 decades now in the business. We still operate our own stores today. So I think starting out early on, it's like you really have a firsthand understanding related to that risk reward of what a franchisee in our world goes through today of like putting that money out there. And for us, back then it was our own money. So we went through those lessons of, investing in the store? How long does it take to get cash flow positive? And what other revenue streams do we need to make it work? So a lot of the systems and the tools that we built today, 20 years later, were kind of born from those school of hard knocks, as we call them, which I think is important, to go through for us now being in the franchising space of really understanding what it takes to make a location successful.
Yeah, I mean, franchisees want to know that you relate to them, right?
For sure. Yeah, that's why it's
Yeah.
important. Rick's involved in a lot of partnerships. I'm still involved in a lot of partnerships at the unit level in an effort to really have that transparent viewprint into the business.
All right. Hey, Rick, before you started this franchise and you guys were working together and you started this company out, what was maybe one of the bigger challenges that you guys had to overcome?
Well, first off, like Jason said, we were pretty aggressive in our early 20s.
Aren't we all?
So we put the foot down on the gas pretty heavy. We had a couple strategic people involved with us early on, and they were making big moves kind of across the country. And we opened multiple locations in several different states in our early 20s. And although we were very excited and aggressive about it, like Jason said, we learned a lot of lessons during that time. So primarily, we weren't set up to really operate multiple locations across state lines. I was driving around, he was driving around. We had a couple different residencies at that point, and it was, as aggressive as it was and as fun as it was a great education for us. We kind of, made it through all that. I think we were resourceful enough and entrepreneurial enough to get through that and make good decisions throughout those times. But I think the biggest learning lesson for us at that point was, let's take a step back, maybe hit the pause a little bit. And what are we missing here? The corporate office, the structure, the admin support, the HR support, the marketing side of this business, all those things we didn't really have figured out at the time, even though I think we thought we did. So, I think the biggest thing for us is, like you said, like we've been through it. So for all the new potential franchisees out there, we've been through it, as much hands-on over the last 20 years as you could probably be. But I think we controlled our growth intentionally and made sure that our support and the structure we have internally is always far ahead of how many units we have today. So we feel very strongly that with our support staff and the office and the structure we have here, we can handle another 15, 20, 30 locations right now, and which is the complete opposite of what we did 20 years ago when we had 0 and the location. So that's kind of how we got to where we are today.
Exactly. Jason, why was that not fatal? Most entrepreneurs in that situation where they were growing too fast and not have everything, their stuff together.
Yeah.
That's when they close up. How did you guys survive it? What exactly did you guys do?
You know what? Rick kind of touched on, I think resourceful is a good word to put to it. Gritty, crazy in a lot of ways, right? I think, we really did enjoy it enough. We both love the business. So I think there's a certain level of just crazy passion you have to have for excitement to kind of weather those really turbulent times.
Sure.
For us, it was really turbulent. Like Rick said, we opened up, I think, 5 or 6 locations in 3 different states in 2006, right? Right before the recession kind of went, turbulence in 2007 and 8. So we really timed it up to really hit some really strong headwinds. So I think, just a crazy, relentless love for the business, and also just fairly resourceful when it comes to different, if we needed capital, we were resourceful and we got it where we could. If we needed to pull together personnel, like Rick said, he had 3 or 4 different residencies in different states, rotating between locations, right? I was on a plane, every month, and we just did what we had to do to kind of get through those times. And I think, that's where really strong relationships, I'm proud to say, Rick and I endured those times together. We're still friends today. We're still business partners. We have a guy who got us started a business that's still a partner with us today. So I think a lot of strong relationships are formed from those really turbulent times. So I'm proud to say, I think that's a big part of it.
That's awesome. Well, what I'm hearing is, you just do whatever it takes, and you weren't afraid to make another decision. I think too many entrepreneurs, they make a mistake and they're afraid to make another decision because they're afraid it's going to be another mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. If there's one thing we did, it was probably taking constant action. It just, probably made a bunch of bad decisions right after each other, but we kept moving the ball down the field,
How would you guys relate that to, you guys played college football together, right? I think.
Yes.
Yeah. So what would you relate that to your sports experience? Do you think that growing up being really active in sports helped you in your entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, right? I mean, I think there's so many similarities. We talk about a lot, Rick and I, in our business and the way we mentor and train, and we have some mastermind groups within the company that like really like kind of treat it like a team almost, right? We have a coach that's, guiding and coaching on the team members, whether it's on a management level in our company or a franchisee. We have different forums that we try to create environments of that like team atmosphere, right? Supports, accountability at times, training, tools. And I think, Rick and I grew up as athletes, like that grit and that winning and losing and getting back in the game over and over again, I think really helped us, especially early on in our careers.
Nice. Rick, when did you guys know you guys were onto something big? How far along?
It's funny. It's funny because I think about that often. I think at first when I got in to this business, immediately I was like, oh, I'm where I'm supposed to be, and this is something big. And then we're like, okay, this isn't exactly what I thought it was. Let's bob and weave a little bit. And then as soon as we did that, we started opening locations, and I was like, all right, we're on to something big here. And then we
Mhm.
hit all those challenges and those speed bumps, and we're working through them. And there's been several moments of that roller coaster where I thought we were on to something big, and then I thought to myself, we better get resourceful or else we're dead in the water here. So there's been many of those moments, but I think the biggest thing for me is when we decided to move to franchising, and we kind of farmed our first couple franchisees, which we can talk about a little bit more if necessary, but
Yeah.
we kind of farmed our first couple franchisees, and they're like they brought life into this company, and they brought more entrepreneurial spirit to the company, and they challenged us, and the competitive side in us was like everything kind of all mixed together in a perfect recipe at that point. And that for me at that point, I didn't, truthfully, I didn't really understand franchising a whole lot at that point either, as crazy as that sounds. But I think that mix of all those things happen in that moment is when I really realized, like, okay, I think we can do something here. I think we have something special. And I think, we're not on our own. We're not on an island anymore. We have all these people with us, and we're all going to do it together. Like Jason said, as a team. And I think that is the athlete, the team sport mentality in us.
Sure.
You might throughout a season, you might lose a couple games, but you're still playing for the playoffs. You're still playing for the championship. And we built a really strong team around us. So, at that moment is when I really thought we had something special.
That's awesome. There's something special too about franchising that nobody really tells us when we start franchising our concept. And it's the healthy push-pull relationship that we have with franchisees. We think, people are just going to buy our franchise and they're going to just follow our rules and our systems, and we're going to go down this merry way of opening 100 locations and everything's going to be perfect. And we know that's not how it works, right? And the challenges are to our benefit, because when franchisees can challenge us and bring ideas, like you kind of said, I mean, that's what brings innovation. It's not just us sitting in that office. That's what makes the company special, is the people we surround ourselves with. When did you guys decide to franchise, and whose idea was it?
I don't know. Rick usually has all the good ideas, so I'll give him credit for it. I think for us, it was that balance of, it was back in like 2016, 17. I think we had some locations of our own, as Rick mentioned. We kind of started building our own clubs, kind of closer to headquarters, Southland of Chicago. And we want to take that next leap into the growth phase, right? So we had some profitable locations. So we simply took some of our operators that did a great job, and we sold them those locations. And those were our first batch of franchisees. They executed through operational excellence. At that point, I was a franchisee of a large system in the wellness space, Massage Envy, and
Mhm.
we had 6 of those locations. So I had a pretty good context around the franchisee franchisor relationship. They were a big franchisor with 1,000 units, so really got to see the pros and the cons of being in a big system like that, and what worked and what were some pain points. So we tried to do the best we could of engineering a system where we could start shifting, it's giving some of that risk reward benefit to our operators, frankly, because there's this life cycle to how long we could retain somebody in maybe a management position, right? We want to give
Right.
them that next level up of their career. And for a lot of them, it was owning their own business.
Well, that's something that's totally different that you guys do than other franchise brands opening all these company owned locations and then essentially implementing your operators into franchisees, right?
Yeah, yeah. It was almost like a built-in resale program that we did just kind of organically, back about 10 years ago. So we still, it's still a little bit part of our strategy. We still love that piece. We love attracting people through the traditional routes. And then also second generation conversion spaces of independent facilities is another way that we're excited about growth in the future. So At the end of the day, we're just looking for, good people that think about business the same way we do.
Sure. Hey, Rick, you guys are obviously in a very crowded sector, right? In fitness. What do you think makes you guys really unique in this industry?
I think there's a couple things around, just maybe the look, the appeal, and the amenities and stuff like that. But I think the biggest thing that's contributed to our success is our first handful of locations that were successful for us were we were positioned in smaller, isolated markets. So the pool of people that we were dealing with and marketing to in our business, you attract the people that are within 3, 5, 7 miles of your brick and mortar, right? And we were in small, isolated markets. So we knew early on that the well is only so big. There's only so many people and you're only going to penetrate X percentage of that population. So we knew quickly for the model to work and for the business to work, the well's only going to be so big. So we really had to define and get really good at our offerings, our service offerings, our different revenue streams, be very creative in our income per member and really dig deep into those communities and then keep people long term. And I think that's the one thing that this industry struggles with is the attrition part of this business and keeping people long term. But we knew early on that we weren't going to had to do better than the national average in this industry in order to survive. So I think a lot of those principles from doing that in those small towns and that mentality around doing it the hard way and doing it the right way and keeping people long term. Now that we're in bigger markets, more denser areas, those principles and are still aligned there and they're still there. So I think that's really what's ultimately led to the success and the profitability at the unit level.
I mean, obviously that's all it comes down to, right? Is the profitability of the of each unit. Otherwise, we're going to stop opening locations in a hurry. Franchisees are not going to be joining the system.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hey, who would you say is the type of person that really thrives in your franchise system?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that one. Yeah, I think for us, it's somebody who has great leadership skills, who loves people, who loves serving others. If they have experience in business, that's a plus. That's not a requirement for us because we really try to focus on having a version of a business model in a box and put a lot of the support around admin and accounting and some of those functions that a lot of times distract small business owners from running their core business. So we try to wrap that up in a support mechanism for our franchisees. They can focus on leading people, driving their teams, and being a part of their community. So I think people that are naturally really comfortable and good at those things are a great fit for us. Rick, anything I missed?
Yeah, I agree. I think, we talked a little bit about, athletes in that background. I think it's not necessarily like you didn't have to be a college athlete to be a good franchisee for us, but that mentality and what you learn, like that grittiness and that desire to win and building a team around you and being a leader that is who we're looking for. And those are the people that thrive in our model. Ultimately at the end of the day, the way we set up our franchise company is for our franchisees to be front and center and not be bogged down with a lot of the admin back office stuff. So you have to be somewhat willing and able and have a desire to be in the facility and be front and center and still be passionate about helping people and building a team around you. So I think that's one of the things that attribute to the success.
Awesome. What are we looking at right now in terms of the number of franchise locations and corporate owned locations?
Yeah, so today we have 11 franchise locations, 8 corporate stores, and then we have 6 more in the pipeline to open up this year. So we're excited about that. We're voyaging out to Florida, Colorado, and another new store in Georgia. So super
And
excited about that.
you've got some multi-unit deals in the works, I understand.
We do. Yeah, we do. We have a couple of great franchisees out in, like I said, Florida and outside of Denver, Colorado. So good stuff.
Is this the first go around with multi-unit, or is everybody single unit operators prior to them?
Within our system, we have about 75% of our current franchisees do own more than one unit. So we have a couple multi-unit folks in our system today. Yeah, which is great.
That's fantastic.
Them to really scale their efforts in their business and, their dollars for sure.
That's a testament to the success. Obviously, nothing better than hearing franchisees want to buy more locations.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
What's the investment range to open a location, and how big is the footprint typically?
So the investment range varies greatly on the construction and the state of the space that they're in. The typical square footage is we average about 10 to 12,000 square feet right now. The location that we're doing in outside of Colorado is substantially bigger than that just because the market size is so much bigger. So, I would call it 10 to 15,000 square feet, so about our average. The investment range to get open is typically about 400 to 800 grand.
Talk to me a little bit about your process of accepting franchisees. What does that look like?
For us, it's it's between a 6 to 8 week process to where, they're interviewing us and we're interviewing them. So, we call it the dating process, the exploration process, the discovery process, but it's a two-way street where we're going to, be an open book, and we want to get to know them and make sure that they're going to have, they have a real desire and they're getting into the business for the right reasons. And, at the end of the day, it makes not only financial sense, but there's cultural fit with values and the way they think about things. So for us, it's a 6 to 8 week process where we'll give them all the information that we possibly can share with them. And then we also connect them with the franchisees in our system, and we encourage them to get on site and visit locations. And then we'll get them to our office in Chicago for a day and a half of a discovery day, right? Where we have a chance to visit some units, talk to franchisees, spend time together, go to dinner, and just ensure that it's a good fit on both sides. So, that's kind of a high level view of typically what it looks like.
Okay. And you guys have been franchisors now for about 7 or 8 years. Rick, what's been maybe one of the bigger surprises you weren't expecting since you franchised?
One of the biggest surprises probably is just the, you sell a franchise to a new franchisee, and like Jason said, we're kind of in the dating phase, and then you get married and you're like, okay, is this still going to work? And I think the most surprising thing for me is that our new franchisees, specifically, like for the last few that have signed for us, it's been such a great experience, and they've been vetting out other franchises and different industries and different businesses, and they landed on us. And for me, I'm like, it's surprising to me. I just didn't really, when you're so focused and in your own box all the time, and you're doing all these things, and what you're doing, and it has value, and what you're doing is successful, but to be able to portray that message to somebody else and then compete with all these other franchises in different industries with way more locations than we have and way bigger, more representation than we have. But I think it's the transparency between Jason and I and our team throughout the process, and the relatability that we have with them, I think, is what's made us successful. And that's probably surprised me the most, is that if somebody wants to buy a franchise from us when they've looked at bigger brands with much more established and way more locations, I think that's saying something. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I think that's a piece in franchising that people forget about, and especially as an emerging brand, founders need to remember that ultimately people buy from people, and it's obviously it's a marriage, but you want to make sure you like the person and if they like you, right? They have to believe in the brand, believe in your vision. Where do you see the vision, or where do you see the company going, Jason, next 5 to 10 years? And how big is big for you all?
Yeah, I think we talk about it often. Like we want to grow at the pace that we can attract great leadership in the stores, right? Like we don't want to necessarily scatter the brand all over the US. We think regional growth in a lot of ways makes a lot of sense, right? Even if as we open up in pockets in Colorado and Florida, and building stable regions in those markets, right? Where we can support them, we can deploy staff, and the franchisees can do the same thing. So we'll grow at the pace that we can attract great people. And we're positioned to do that. Like Rick said, our corporate team is stacked up to be able to support the next 15, 20, 25 locations without adding a tremendous amount of additional labor on our side. So we're super excited. We feel like we've done a good job for the last 2 decades of building the right infrastructure to support that responsible growth.
Yeah. Isn't it a blessing that we learned what we did back in our early 20s of growing too fast and what happens? And now we know not to do that. And you probably sound totally different than you did way back then.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, I think we're both blessed to have taken those risks, in our 20s and going through those processes, because, back then you don't have as much to lose as you do later in your career, right? So
Absolutely.
I think it was painful going through it for sure, but I think in hindsight, it was for sure what it was meant to be, right?
Oh my gosh, it was a gift. I mean, Rick, just think now you can share with franchisees that want to open 2, 3, 4 locations too quickly, right? As you're supporting them, tell them to slow down and don't do as I did, do as I say.
Yeah. And people appreciate that. It's honesty, right? It's not,
Yeah.
I'm not just trying to sell you something to sell you something. I want you to be successful. It's a lot more meaningful to us at the end of the day. When we were 22 years old and opening fitness centers across the country. If you would ask me that question, I would have said I want 10,000 of these across the world, right? It's just, by going through all that, we've not only kind of put ourselves in check, but I think just being honest and being transparent with these franchisees to say, hey, your success is more important than opening 20 of these. You do this the right way and there's a strategic timeline and makes sense and you get all your ducks in a row in a timely manner. It's a lot more meaningful 10 years from now or 5 years from now or 20 years from now than if you just go open 20 right now. So we do have people in our network that are like that and aggressive. And I think they can learn from, like you said, they can learn from our experience.
Right. You've been, you're a 20-year overnight success, right, Jason?
That's right. That's a good way to say it.
Exactly.
For sure.
All right, Jason, since you're the macro guy, tell me about the trends that you're seeing in the industry. Where do you think where are things leading and changing in fitness that your clientele is looking for something different than maybe they did 20 years ago?
Yeah, I think it's, the big changes. It's, back 20 years ago was, all about like the equipment you have in a facility and, treadmills and strength and what do you have in your box. I think now it's more going to holistic wellness. And people want to feel better mentally, emotionally, spiritually. They want support, they want to feel better when they leave. So, the way we're thinking about helping people relax and recover and revitalize their mind and, create those behavioral changes that are really important when it comes to a general wellness routine. So I think taking a shift from being just a fitness center that has equipment to like, what are those other offerings that we could have that kind of help the whole person is something that we're staying pretty focused on. So that's a big one.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't talk about the term longevity 20 years ago, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Rick is saying he's living to a healthy 100. So I'm excited to join him on that journey.
I hope to be right there with you guys.
Good.
I do think that's the biggest thing. It's just, it's not just getting in and getting a workout in our facilities. I think it's the whole package. Like there's the recovery side of things, the longevity side of things, the more specific program for each individual and not a big blanket representation of what the programming should be for everybody. And those are things that we weren't talking about even 10 years ago, probably even 5 years ago. And there's a lot more on the horizon, specifically when it comes to that. We have areas designed in our clubs that are separate, that are recovery areas. It's totally different look, feel, vibe from the main workout space. The main workout space is bright, high energy, movement. And then there's a separate space where it's dark, it's calm, it's recovery. There's different recovery amenities in there. It's more focused on relaxation and totally different look and vibe. And when we first started putting those into our facilities about 18 months ago, we were really cautiously optimistic about how people were going to latch onto that. And it's been super successful. So it goes to tell us that people want to keep their business with you, but they want more. And so that's what we're really focused on. We really try to stay engaged in the industry, attend events, and know what's coming down the pipeline. And we're first to market on a lot of things bigger. I think because of our size and how entrepreneurial we are and how close our franchisees are to us, we can add things to our menu very quickly, swiftly, and productively that something that works is hard to do. So.
What about the services itself? What's more popular, group training or one-on-one training for you guys?
One-on-one training for the first 10 years was probably it was for sure the most popular. And then we kind of proactively shifted to a more of a group model and it was wildly successful, very successful for us. And we're still right now, we're probably real close to 50-50 between group and one-on-one. I think what happened primarily with COVID and coming out of COVID, the one-on-one, it took a shift back to one-on-one and away from group just naturally, I think, with all the stuff that was going on with COVID. And now it's starting to kind of swing back towards group a little bit, but based off of, probably that big shift, coming out of COVID, just heavy into one-on-one and away from group as much. So it's taken a little bit of time for the group to kind of get market share back for us in our business, but it's real close to probably 50 for now.
All right, fair enough. All right, Jason, let's talk legacy here. What do you guys hope, big picture, to leave with this brand?
You know what? I mean, we want to, obviously continue to grow it at scale, the most efficiently we can. We love the idea of, having a good cluster of multi-unit franchisees that are super excited to be partners with us and we're super excited to be partners with them. So that's a big focus for us. And I think through all that, you create those legacy memories together, right? Financial success, support, and what that means for, generational wealth that, we can pass on to our kids and maybe get them involved in a business or whatever that next torch is. As Rick mentioned, we're kind of serial entrepreneurs at heart. We have lots of things that we're excited about doing. And this one for us is a big one to bring people along with that are excited about helping other people the way we are.
Oh, is there a spinoff coming?
You know what? I mean, we got a lot of ideas. We got a lot of dry race sports here. So let's save that for your next episode. But yeah, we're super excited about a lot of things. So, for us, we try to balance that excitement with, kind of a hyper focus on the task at hand.
All right. Rick, tell me, why is now a great time for people to join Fitness Premier and buy a franchise?
Well, I think first off, right now, for the first time in a very long time, the younger demographic is very excited about fitness again. It's been a while since I've truly seen that, and that's very exciting for us, obviously. The younger demographic is more active. If you look at the breakdown of who's signing up at our clubs and new members on a monthly basis, it's skewing like to the younger age demographic. And for the last several years, it was not like that. So that's very exciting for us, and that's very exciting, obviously, for the future. It's been a long time coming. I think, our take has always been, if somebody starts exercising, living a healthy lifestyle earlier in life, the more apt they are to continue to do that for their entire life. And right now we're seeing big waves of that younger generation and younger demographic joining our facilities, and they're excited about it. They're checking into the club, and they're promoting it online, and they're promoting themselves. And there's a lot of that going on. And that's very exciting to me for the future, that this is here to stay, and it's going to continue to get even more popular. And I think we go through waves and everything, but that's where we're at today. So that's very exciting. And then secondly, kind of what we touched on already, if there's a lot of people that this is their dream to own a gym, and this is their passion, and they want to live their life in the gym just like we did. And for us specifically with Fitness Premier, I think there's an opportunity to say, you could go do this on your own. There's really not a lot of barriers to entry to open your own gym. You need a space, you buy some equipment, and there you go. But learning from our first 15 years in business, there's a lot more to it than what you think there is, and it's a lot harder to be successful, and you can really streamline the process to profitability with the systems and just our experience in this, rather than trying to figure it out on your own.
Absolutely. There's no reason to go on your own when, you guys have already paved the way.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. All right, Jason, hey, if someone was interested in learning more about buying a franchise, where would they go?
Best place to go would be probably fitnesspremierclubs.com, and find us there, own a club, click on that, and you can find us and track us on there.
Sweet. All right, I got one last question for both of you guys. I call this the franchise tip jar because the franchise community is so generous with sharing of advice and tips and information. So what do you guys, both of you, think is maybe the most underrated skill that a franchisor needs that not enough people talk about?
Yeah. I think, like when I think about joining a franchise system, I think about making sure that there's real alignment with the people that are running the company. Like, I think as a franchisor, having exceptional people skills, relationship skills, leadership skills is a very important thing. Rick and I are both involved in a lot of, I would say, executive groups ourselves to continue to sharpen our craft to grow as effective leaders. So I think that's one of the things, is always being growth minded and being open to new ideas and being ready to solve problems, because you are going to have those incremental, when you have franchisees in a system, you're going to have to help them solve problems. And I think being really, really comfortable with that, really skilled at working through that is very important.
My answer is very similar. Like Jason said, we invest a lot in ourselves, and are part of several different groups outside our industry and within our industry that we pay to be in. So I think the biggest thing is to continue to invest in yourself and always have the desire to get better and learn. Every situation that comes up is there's a lot of situations that are going to come up that you've never dealt with before. So to have a group of people, like-minded individuals that you associate yourself with, and can bounce ideas off and learn from each other in different industries, different businesses. So I think the biggest thing for me is I think I've really accelerated my growth once I started investing in it and attending different groups and learning from others, and not thinking like I know everything and I can handle it myself.
Guys, that is great advice. Rick, entrepreneurship is lonely. And I'd venture to say, even the two of you being partners, it's still a lonely business where we do need to get some outside perspective, because otherwise we live in a vacuum, right? You guys don't want to just keep bouncing ideas back and forth with one another. And you end up breathing in your own fumes, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah. Well said. Well said.
You can go down the wrong path and keep going for a long time.
Exactly. True. Well, guys, thank you so much for being on the show. I wish you all the best, continued success with Fitness Premier. And I'm looking forward to seeing that grand opening in Sarasota.
Awesome. We'd love to have you. Thanks for having us, Frank. We really appreciate it.
Thank you
so much, Frank.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.